Well, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Let Love Begin podcast. Today, my guest is Marla Martenson, and we are going to be talking about how to maintain boundaries while keeping your heart open. Now, this episode, I really loved recording this with Marla because, it's very easy to get into a pattern with the people that we're with, and not just the people that we're dating, but our co-workers, our families, particularly our friends. People kind of they know how they can push us and maybe we let them. And so in this episode, we're going to talk about how we can keep our boundaries with love and respecting ourselves. So if you've always put your needs last and everyone else in front of you, and then you feel a little bit of resentment because of it, then take a listen to this episode. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. We talk about romantic relationships, we talk about family relationships, boundary setting in general, and how we might also be able to recognize if our boundaries are a little bit relaxed. So, yeah, without further ado, here we go. This is Let Love Begin, a podcast for the recovering brokenhearted, ready to heal and reclaim their enthusiasm. Okay, so welcome, Marla. I'm really excited you're here today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is so exciting.
It is exciting. I'm glad we finally got to record this episode. Today, we're going to talk about how to maintain boundaries while keeping your heart open. So, yeah, welcome. Let's dive right in. So I think before we kind of get into the meat of how we do it, let's describe what boundaries are. What are boundaries?
Yeah, boundaries. Right. Boundaries, we hear a lot about boundaries lately, and people often think a boundary is what you set uh, for someone else not to cross or someone else to hold, where really a boundary is what you will and will not accept, what you will and will not tolerate for yourself. So it is the boundary is between you and you, really. And it could be my boundary is I'm not going to go to sleep listening to my phone anymore. Or my boundary is I'm going to go to yoga every other day. Or my boundary is I'm going to cut down on my alcohol. Or my boundary is I'm not going to gossip. So it's what we will and will not accept or tolerate. It could be within ourselves or within another person, somebody else's behavior. But what we have to remember, and we'll talk about, is the boundaries always between you, ourselves, not for somebody else to uphold, because it's not their boundary.
Okay, so what if we're in a relationship? I'm just kind of jumping right into this one, but what if we're in a relationship and our boundaries are conflicting?
Well, it sounds like if you're saying boundaries are conflicting, it sounds kind of like what you want in a relationship are conflicting, or values or what you want or what you're looking for that's conflicting. A lot of people think it's like, okay, this is what I think and this is what you think, and those aren't really boundaries. So let's say your husband or your roommate always leaves the dishes in the sink, and you can't stand it, and you end up washing them, and you've asked them not to do it, and they're not going to they're not going to listen, because no, I don't want to do the dishes. So there's these actual scripts that you can use that are very simple, and you may say, hey, I really feel disrespected when you constantly leave your dishes in the sink. Are you willing to wash your dishes? And if they're reasonable, they'll say, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you felt like that. I will do that. Now, let's say they're not reasonable. So you always have, that's like your plan A. You'll have a plan B ready. So what are you going to do to take care of yourself if they don't comply? If they're not going to say, yeah, sure, I'll do my dishes. What are you going to do? So let's say one thing might be, okay, well, since you refuse to take responsibility and wash your dishes, I'm going to be serving dinner on paper plates from now on. Think of an action that you will take to honor and take care of yourself. Let's say there's a neighbor whose dog keeps coming over in your yard and doing his business in your yard, and they won't stop it. So you say to your neighbor, listen, I really feel uncomfortable when your dog comes over and does his business in my yard. Are you willing to keep your dog in your own yard? If they say, oh, I'm so sorry, then that's great. If they don't, if they're still not doing it, you say, since you're not willing to take responsibility and keep your dog in your yard, the next time your dog comes in my yard, I'll be calling animal control or whatever. So you decide, and then you've got to hold it. If you say that's what you're going to do, you have to do it, because then you're just the person who cries wolf. And so sometimes we may think, oh, the other person, how are they going to feel? Are they going to be offended? Are they going to be hurt? But taking care of ourselves and in a nice way. We don't have to be nasty about it, but knowing what we need for ourselves, there's nothing mean about it. It's actually it's self-preservation, it's self-nurturing. Being selfish is not a bad word.
Yeah, I like that. So you're holding a boundary and then you're following through. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about boundaries more specifically in partnerships, romantic partnerships. I know that when we don't hold boundaries, let's talk about what does it look like when we don't hold boundaries and what that kind of does, how that erodes us.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can share from my own life how it literally eroded me is from the get-go over the decades. I mean, from my early relationships, I allowed men to bully me, to verbally abuse me, to dismiss me, to put me down. And where there's some other work to be done there to look back into our childhood and see where we set that up with our shadow work and the underlying commitments, that all of this stuff, codependency issues, but putting that aside. So all of that, even though I would smile and I'd brush it off, or if they'd put down my interests, it was hurting. It was always hurting. And yet I kept selecting. And then those relationships, after a few years, that one would end. And then I'd get into another one, the same guy in a different pair of pants, and,
Yeah.
and I'd marry him. And then I'd end up 7 years later getting a divorce because it was always the same issue. And I didn't have the boundary within myself and honoring myself to say, I'm not putting up with this, and saying, if you can't speak to me with respect, then I'm leaving the room. I'm leaving the relationship, or this is not happening. And I never knew how to get around it, how to stop it. I'd cry, stamp my feet. Why are you saying that? And none of that works. So, but once we get, okay, what is it that I will and will not accept or tolerate? What do I need to take care and honor myself? And finally, I got it late in life. And oh, it feels so good when somebody starts gaslighting you or putting you down or ranting or yelling, which happens to me because I tend to, I was attracting that kind of dynamic. And then you just know this is not acceptable to me, so we won't be getting together, or however you want to take care of it. But you have to, but then you have to hold that, because then it's just, okay, well, she says don't do it and she's not going to put up with it, but what's she going to do to stop it? Some people will be shocked that you took that action, that you're strong, but you feel like a freaking goddess. It's so such a it's a simple thing once you get it, but man, you feel so good once you start knowing what you need, want, and to honor yourself in a respectful and self-honoring way.
Well, that's the thing. I think you're just like, I value myself, I respect myself enough to not let somebody treat me like this. And it's okay that I have that boundary. And if you're not willing to honor that, then we're not a good match.
Yes. And even early on in dating, if the person is consistently late, or they say, okay, well, I'm going to be over at 8 o'clock, we're going to watch a movie, and they always come over at 9, or they're refusing to, whatever, split the check, or you got to, once we nip it in the bud right away, and then we don't waste. This is what I see women doing and what I did. We waste 6 months, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years on relationships. Pretty soon you see you're 50, 60, 70 years old because we kept burning through these things for years, sticking with them for years, because we didn't know how to set boundaries. We didn't and a lot of that codependency, it's hard. It can be challenging. I'm not saying it's so simple. It takes some practice and it takes some work. I'm a boundaries coach, so I have a whole program there, and there's a great book called "Setting Boundaries Will Set You Free" by Nancy Levin, who's my coach. And you go through a lot of the stuff step by step to get up to that point. But I really think it's important for women, especially. We get attached to the men. We get the oxytocin that's released, that would attach us to the guy. We've got these cords, and once we're intimate with them, once we're affectionate, we're just like, oh my gosh, this oxytocin, which is a hormone that's released to bond us, and we think, this is the guy, this is him, I want to marry this guy. And we know in the back of our, no, these red flags are popping up everywhere. And yet we still want to be with them, or we feel guilty for leaving them, or what if we don't find somebody else, or what's going to happen, or all of these things that go through our mind.
What if we're in the scenario of we've been with someone and we are aware that our boundaries are pretty lax and we'd like to do something about that, but this person that we're with, whether it be a coworker, a family member, a lover, they're really used to us having very relaxed boundaries. So
Yeah.
how do we kind of navigate that situation where we're like, okay, I'm aware of this, I really want to change, but these people are so used to me being this certain way, and there's going to be some sort of pushback. Where do we kind of start in that
Mm.
scenario?
Yeah, you can do some smaller beginner boundaries with them. And let's say they're arguing or something. And then you say, I feel really disrespected when you raise your voice in our conversation. Are you willing not to do that? And then if they're not, well, you never bothered you before, and whatever. And you can say, well, I have realized, I've done a lot of self-reflection, and it really does bother me. And so if you're not willing to speak in a respectful manner, then the conversation is going to end. I'm going to leave the room. And you want to write it out first. Maybe you might want to write it out. You want to play a scenario with a friend, with your teddy bear, whatever, with your dog, having, practicing what they might say and what you might say. And you might even say, hey, I know I've been doing some self-work, and I've been lax about my boundaries, and I really realized what I want and what I want in my life. And I'm sharing it, and I'm going to be upholding that. You could
Mm.
even say that.
And then just little by little, I think that consistency, the more consistent you are, the more they'll learn that you really mean
Yes.
what you say.
And work doing it with yourself, like sitting down and thinking, okay, now what is it in my life? Can I pick something that I may be doing? Like a morning and evening routine is very good to locate and honor yourself in the morning. So every morning, what am I going to do? I'm going to journal for 5 minutes, do some stretching, meditate for 5 minutes before I begin my day. And then the evening, what's my evening routine going to be? Well, that may be a nice cup of hot tea, reading an inspirational couple of pages, and doing a little 5 more minutes of journaling or whatever. So that really, when you set yourself in a little morning routine and an evening routine, you're making yourself a priority. You're finding out what's important to you. You may want to journal. What are the things that you may want to cut out? What are the things you may want to incorporate? Maybe you're running around doing things for everybody else, errands. Maybe your neighbor says, hey, can you do this or that? Can I borrow this or that? And you're constantly giving and giving. And you may think, okay, I want to rein that in, and you write it down, right? What's draining you, what you want to stop, and then what you want to bring in. Maybe, oh no, I need some more of me time. I'm going to take that hour yoga class, or I'm going to indulge and watch that trashy whatever YouTube episode that I like of that gossip show tonight. I had somebody recently tell me, oh, what are you doing? There's this podcast I want to tell you about. And I said, well, that sounds great, but a new episode of such and such just came out on YouTube that I'm going to watch. He didn't like it. He says, oh, you could be doing so much more. You could be so much more productive. There's other things you could be doing with your time than that stupid show. And it was so good. I said, it's not up to you to decide what I do with my time. I decide what I'm going to do with my time. Well, the person didn't like it. They ranted a little bit more and said, have fun, and hung up on me.
Wow.
And
Gosh,
so,
that
yeah,
escalated quickly.
hung up on me. And
Hmm.
so I was just kind of like, well, that's kind of interesting. And then 2 minutes later, texted an apology. And I said, listen, we've got to talk about this, because I can't, your Jekyll and Hyde personality is not working for me. So I can't be around that. So you're going to have to check yourself. And then the person said, I want to work on it. I'm sorry. But in the past, I was so used to being yelled at. I was so used to being told, oh, what are you doing? That's so stupid. Because I have some pretty far out interests. I'm a tarot reader. I like my crystals. I like going in the forest. And, I like doing things that maybe is not so mainstream that some people don't like. And a lot of the men I was involved with didn't like it, or some other things that I liked. And I would just be used to them putting it down, yelling at me. Not anymore.
I'm glad to hear that, because I don't know. I like those things too. So I don't feel like they're super far out. And I feel like it's a really silly thing to put somebody down for. Gosh. I mean,
Look, we're here in this life. We don't stay young that long. Time rolls on, and we've got a certain finite amount of time on this earth in this body. And I'm just like, we've got to enjoy every minute, just juice it out to the last drop. I want to enjoy and not have other people decide what's important. And they will, a lot of times they'll try to decide for you what's important, what you should be doing. I was maybe an extreme case. I mean, men would tell me what I should be reading, what music I should listen to, what kind of exercise I should be doing, what kind of spirituality, who I should be praying to. It went pretty deep. Now I feel like a boundary badass because that was exactly what I needed. And that's what I've been studying for the last few years and working with. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more in a linear fashion about your journey through your separation and how you maintained your boundaries. You've been on quite a journey, which is how you've got to being a boundary badass, which I love. Were there some significant moments for you that really kind of tipped you over the edge and helped you to dive into learning more about this and then implementing it in your life?
Yeah, my 20-year marriage. Before that, I was married to someone else for 7 years, and then before that, I was with another man for a few years, and so I was always a long-term relationship person. But like I said, I always chose men who were overbearing and opinionated and critical and all of this, and it got to the point where, well, I started to break down physically. I had breast pain. I couldn't raise my right arm over my head. Just there was a lot of. I thought, you know what? I know that stress or being miserable in a relationship can cause cancer. It can cause anxiety. It can cause a lot of things. It can kill you. And so I thought, well, at this point, I couldn't get around it either. I didn't know how to stop when he would be critical or tell me, "What are you doing?" or ranting, yelling, criticizing, nitpicking. I felt like I was living in a boot camp, more. It was just like always on me, on me, on me. And my mantra started to be, leave me alone, just leave me alone. And it would, and I felt like a whiny kid because I would cry, I would scream. There were times I would collapse on the floor from it. It was too intense. And I'm thinking to myself, this is ridiculous. This isn't elegant. This isn't adult. But what can I do? And I just didn't know because had been my pattern my whole life. And so I started studying with Nancy Levin. She's got Levin Life Coach Academy, and she's with Hay House.
Mm-hmm.
And her first coaching program that we got certified in was boundaries. Become a boundary badass. Setting boundaries will set you free. And so to get certified in it, we had to be coached by Nancy in a group. Then we had to coach someone in the group. We had to also be coached by somebody else in the group. And so then we had to have two practice people to be we had to coach. So I really was working with this a lot. And slowly I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't been honoring myself. And it would have been so, if I would have known this years and years ago, that the way you stop it is you decide what you will and will not tolerate, what you will and will not accept, and then you set your boundary and you hold it. They might get mad. My husband got very upset about it. He says, "You're bullshit boundaries. This is ridiculous. This is toxic." Because they don't, he didn't want that,
Yeah, of
but
course.
I
He gets a
had
good
to.
payoff.
Yeah, yeah. He's like, this is stupid.
Yeah, of course
Well,
he would.
but when you're talking about with an open heart, so and not blaming. So I could always say, he did this, he treated me like this, he said
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But over the years, and as a coach and matchmaker, I like to also acknowledge that all of these men that I've been in relationships with that didn't treat me right, I picked them, I went out with them, I
Right.
moved in with them, I married them and stayed with them. And so I have to take my responsibility for that. Yeah, they didn't behave appropriately, but I stuck around for it. And because of my childhood wounds or my whatever, codependency, whatever issues that I wasn't even aware of was happening, had me stay. And many women will do that, and they'll have a kid with somebody, then they'll have another child and another one, even knowing, and then they're even stuck. And some women have issues with money, or the man is paying all the bills, and then they just can't leave. And so I just love this work because the faster we can get it, the faster we can honor ourselves and set these boundaries. We won't get into those positions where maybe then you're in a situation 30, 40 years. I see, because I follow some of these Facebook groups with narcissistic abuse and different people talking. There are women who say, oh, I'm in a relationship 40 years, I'm leaving, 50 years. I'm so miserable, or I wish I could leave, or I'm just leaving now, but they have to pick up
Mm,
the pieces. I mean, that's tough. That is tough to leave after 40 years,
very,
because
very tough.
even if you're miserable, it's what you're used to. It's really a challenge. And so, so also, so the keeping an open heart part is knowing that your partner, that other person that's you're having to set boundaries with, they've got their childhood wounds, they've got their issues, why they're behaving this way. So allowing them, okay, well, I can't stay in the line of fire here and continue to have myself be damaged. Maybe you have to leave, but you can leave with an open heart and not keep blaming. It doesn't feel good when you're constantly blame in victim mode and blaming. And
Yeah,
yeah,
you can't change anything that you don't take responsibility for, right? If you don't own it,
yeah,
how can you change it? Okay, so you separated from your second husband, the longer relationship, the 20-year one?
yeah. It was actually my third husband, because I had a few year marriage right out of high school that I
Okay.
kind of don't even count. It was one of those, hormone fueled dumb things, but we're in that place. I just got a Christmas card from him, and I do go back and visit about every 3 months, because we have a dog. We own a house together. We've got a dog together for all these years. And so it was really, really tough. And now about a year and a half later, it feels like, okay, I can go back and stay in the house if I want. I can stay on my side of the house if I want, and he can stay on his, or whatever. Which I wanted. I didn't want one of those where I never want to see. I'd have friends that would say, "You should never talk to him again. You have to cut him off, block him,
Right.
pretend he's dead, and you never see the dog again, and don't ever go to the house again." And I'm like, "Well, that doesn't feel good to me." I needed to reset, leave. Maybe one day we'll get back together. I don't know. He's not really working on he doesn't think there's anything wrong on his side of the fence,
Right.
but I can't change him. All I can
No.
do is work on myself. And at least I've stopped. I cried. I mean, it was so much to release. I cried for about a year and a half. One thing that helped, if anybody's in this position, is I asked myself, Marla, what do you need? What do you need? What's going to help you? And I heard the words hot yoga. And so I'd
Okay.
never done hot yoga. I'd done yoga, but I said, hot, ooh, I don't like heat, but I said, well, I'm going to try it. So I went and joined a beautiful studio, and I showed up, and after the first one, I was like, "Oh my god, it was so hard to be in a 115-degree room for an hour doing these things." And
Mhm.
I cried, but I kept showing up, and every time I thought to myself, "Maybe after this class, I'm gonna cancel my membership," but I didn't. I kept showing up. I was in the back of the class. I was crying. Nobody knew I was crying, but I was sobbing and releasing, and I felt like I released 40 years of trauma for just 6
Wow.
months of showing up and moving in that heat and allowing the toxins come out of my body and crying. A couple friends said, "Gee, you sure are crying a long time. It's been quite a while now." And then I thought, well, that's what my body needs. I don't start to it just comes out. It just comes out. I couldn't go in certain stores. It would trigger me because certain stores that we used to go to, like those chain stores, like there's Target and Home Depot, and they all smell the same. They're all laid out the same, no matter what state they're in. You can go to any, New York, California, wherever, it's the same. So you feel like you're there. To going to a mall, because we used to go to the mall together, and it would always trigger me. I'd have to leave and sit in my car and cry. But now looking back, and I thought, oh my God, but now looking back, I'm like, well, that's what I needed to do. And so anybody who's listening to this, who's going through that and feels like, when is it going to get better? Am I ever going to stop? I have these trauma bonds, or I can't. It does just allow yourself that grace to, if you need to jump up and down, cry, scream in a pillow, run around the block every morning, whatever. But movement helps. Movement definitely helps.
It also helped me actually. I did yoga. I don't do hot yoga, but vinyasa. Absolutely. Like just moving. And I think for me as well, when I stopped doing yoga for a little while, it was I missed it more with my mind. It's because when things get hard in the studio and you push through it just to that next bit, if I just get to the next bit, or then when you get really confident with it, you're like, okay, now I can focus on my breathing better. And now I can focus on like stretching my arms up just that little bit more. All these little things are such a great metaphor for all the tiny little pieces and ways we can move forward in our lives with like boundaries and
And yoga is designed to, all those poses are like cleansing out the lymphatic system's getting moved, and it's cleansing out different organs, releasing toxins from organs. It's good for the thyroid. It's doing a lot. It doesn't seem like it, but it is doing a lot for you.
I really love that you brought that up. Thank you for that. That's a really, really healthy way to kind of examine ourselves. We think of doing, I was just on another episode recently and we talked about doing the work, and doing the work can look really different for everyone. And boundary setting is part of doing the work. And I think that the medium that you kind of talked about of yoga is part of that journey. And it's really, really helpful.
I did so much. And what I was doing, I was thinking, am I doing enough? Am I doing what I need to? But I had a therapist, a PhD therapist that I had about 12 sessions with. I had a divorce coach at one point. I had an energy healer for about a year. Got regular, and I'm an energy healer, but I had hired a couple of them doing energy healing, clearing. What else? The yoga, also just random coaches that I do one session with, psychics. I spent a lot of money. I spent probably about $12,000 in a year and a half on different things that I needed. And now I'm like, gosh, why did I instead of beating myself up because I tended to think, God, why did I do that? I did what I needed felt that I needed some assistance. I needed some help. I needed to figure this out. Plus, I
Absolutely.
was being actively coached by Nancy Levin because I was getting certified in other coaching programs along the way, which I have another one called the New Relationship Blueprint, which I'm doing a group coaching session for in January. So that is great because I think we just jump in. We just, like, we're born and we grow up and we just jump in without even thinking about a lot of things, how we want it, how we should be treated, how we just think, oh, we're attracted to this person. That's my Prince Charming, or that's my soulmate, because there's some sexual desire there, or excitement, or they look really hot and you had a great date and you think, okay, well, maybe this is the one, when we don't know anything about them. That's a little bit of a danger there, that humans, we're very visual, and we like that excitement and feeling, and we tend to, instead of putting on the brakes and saying, okay, let's just let them show themselves. Oh, there's something else I wanted to share. There was a coach that Kevin from the Royal I was watching one of his videos recently, and he's, that thing where they say, oh, you teach people how to treat you. You
Hmm.
teach people how to treat. That's that saying. And he says, no, he says, you don't need to teach people how to treat you. You observe how they are acting, and then you decide, is that for you or is that not for you? You don't need to train anybody or teach anybody anything. You observe. And that clicked. And a lot of women also, because I do readings, they'll call me for a reading, or especially on the psychic hotlines, and they want to know, is this guy going to call me back? We had one date. Is he into me? What's he thinking? Is he interested? Is he going to call again? I haven't heard from him for 2 weeks, but is he going to call? I get a lot of calls like this, and that's why I want to mention it, because we tend to put our power outside of ourselves into somebody else to pick us, to choose us. Are they going to call? Are they going to pick us? Do they want to see us? What are they thinking? Instead of, hey, this person ghosted you for 2 weeks. Is that polite? No, take a look. He said he's kind of busy. Haven't heard from him for a month, but oh, is he going to call? And I'm like, well, if he does, is that okay with you, that you haven't heard from somebody for a month?
That's a very good point. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, how we see what we want to see instead of seeing what's actually happening and what's actually right in front of us.
Yeah, we put on those rose-colored glasses, but we got to take those off.
I really liked before that you gave us that framework. You were like, when this happens, I feel, that nonviolent communication. When this happens, I feel. Would you be willing? That's a really great framework. Do you have any other frameworks like that you could share with us?
Yeah, and it is important to remember, always keep it in the I, because the other person's going to be on the defense. If you say, when you always do this, or you always do that, or when you say this, instead of saying, I feel hurt, or I feel disrespected, or I feel frustrated, or I feel confused, whatever, when this happens, or when you say this, or when you do this, are you willing to? If there's something also we call the company line. So let's say you're in a relationship and he keeps saying, oh, you gained a few pounds or what, they say something that really bugs you, like, well, even if they're trying to joke about it, oh yeah, looking a little, and then you say, please don't, do that. And they keep doing it and say, okay, well, because you're not willing to stop, the next time you say that, I'm leaving the room. And then if they don't, the company line, it's just a reminder when you say that, I'm leaving the room, and you leave the room. It's like just a reiteration, just a reminder. And then you say, just a reminder, if you're not going to do your dishes, we're going to be eating off paper plates. And that's
Mm.
it.
Here's my boundary. Yeah.
So just adding that
Mm.
company line there.
Mm.
But it is important to remember to keep it in the eye
Right. I feel
as
like,
much as you can.
there will be a fair bit of kicking and screaming from the other person of when their boundaries are held. Have you noticed that once you start stating your boundaries and then following through consistently, how long do you normally see like either a change in behavior or a breakdown of the relationship?
For me, I ended up having to leave because there wasn't anything, will you get counseling? No, you're the one who needs help. Will you stop talking to me like that? No, because I wouldn't have had to talk to you that way if you didn't do this or that. And so there was no choice. So I held my boundary. And this is something good to remember too, is another person's urgency is not yours. So if somebody said, yo, can you get back to me right now? And you could just take a breath and know that, other people's, when you said they might, get all upset, they might not handle it well. Their reaction to your boundary is not your responsibility. Unless you're dealing with a kid, these are adults. And so you have to allow them to sit with their feelings or their reaction to it and allow them to do that, not manage someone else's experience, which is like codependent behavior, where you're trying to manage the outcome, managing how they
Yeah.
react, or, oh, no, they might react that way. I better not say that. Oh, I might hurt their feelings. Well, maybe their feelings will be hurt, but they'll live and they'll have to deal with that.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that, not managing somebody else's feelings. Yeah. I feel, years ago, I can't remember, I think I was reading a book, and in a lot of the lines in the book said, when this is a great example of that. When you try to manage somebody else's feelings, you're trying to control their experience, and sometimes
Yep.
you're interrupting their experience. I think that's what they said. And when you interrupt somebody else's experience, you stop them from having their own journey. And yeah, it might be painful, but that's part of it. It's part of the journey. We're all doing the work is uncomfortable.
A good example of this is my brother died in 2004. He was 39. And when somebody would bring him up in front of my mother, if we were, in a social setting or something like that, I'd go, "Shh, don't bring it up." I was afraid that she would be hurt or devastated, or I don't know what it was, but that wasn't me to manage. I don't know, I don't know that how she would have reacted or what, but I was trying to prevent her from being hurt, or, I used to do that all the time. I try to manage other people's feelings, experiences. Oh no, I got to save them. I can't. What would they do without me? What would they do without? But
Right.
that was my, sickness, that I needed to try to swoop in and save. I was a victim, but I was also the savior. And so I've just had to work a lot. But you know what? It's so freeing when you just put down that job. It's not our job to manage other people's experiences, lives, healing. And so we can just put that down and just work on ourselves. And it's like, whoo.
Well, I think that if everybody did that, if everybody worked on themselves, what a difference. What a different world we'd live in.
Oh, yeah. I had a challenge today. I sent a good friend a Christmas gift. I ordered it online and it was delivered. And I was thinking, oh, this is different because I've known her for a long time. It was a different kind of gift than I'd given before. But I thought it was things that she'd like. It was a gift basket with some goodies and gourmet stuff. And she sent me a picture of it and said, it came here. Is this what you meant to send me? Was this what you sent me? I said, yes. I hope you like. Why would you ask that? And she goes, well, it would have been, cheaper if you just sent me a gift card. It would have been better if I don't eat that stuff.
Oh,
And I was like, ooh, triggered, like, "What?" You know?
yeah.
And I didn't like her answer, and I thought, "But I know there's stuff in there that you would like, and I'm surprised, I'm shocked." And then I was like, "Well, just give it away." I'm just give it. And, "Okay," she says, "I will." And I says, "Well, Merry Christmas." And she may have taken it as Merry Christmas. And I'm like, Merry Christmas, like the Grinch. And I'm like, wait a minute. I was reading the boundary book again, too. I was going over some stuff and I'm like, hey, that's not exactly what we're talking about, but it's these things where we get triggered over things and that somebody else is feeling. And, that something like that could make somebody hold a grudge, or it's like, okay. And I didn't like the response, but I have to take responsibility for my feelings about that. So
Right.
I'm just like kind of trying to work with it. Right.
Just before we wrap up, I have one more question. What are some signs that we make? Because I guess there's some people kind of moving through the world that may not even realize that they have relaxed boundaries, or, there's different levels of awareness around it. How do we kind of recognize if we are perhaps one of those people?
Maybe you're feeling resentment is one of them. It's and there's something called short-term discomfort over long-term resentment. And so if you didn't tell someone, if they just keep leaving their dishes, or they keep making this one comment that they think is funny, but it's about you, maybe your hair, your shape, or your whatever, your clothing choice, and you just don't say anything, and then it builds up and builds up, and you're feeling this resentment instead of that short-term discomfort where, yeah, you were talking about earlier, maybe they're going to not like it, but say, hey, I really feel uncomfortable when you make those remarks. Would you please not do that? And they'll probably say, oh, I didn't even realize, of course. And so that maybe it was hard for you and it was a short-term discomfort, but then it's done, instead of this long-term resentment that you're holding. So if you have resentment, if you're feeling exhausted because you're doing things that people keep asking you favors, or doing things that you don't want to do, maybe somebody's asking you to go out. Oh, come on, come out tonight, come out and hear this band play. And you've worked all day, you're just tired, you've got to get up in the morning, and you're like, oh, and you say yes anyway, but you don't want to go. And so you're there and you're like, I wish I was in my warm bed, but I went out. So if things like that, you may be exhausted, you may feel resentment, you may be upset with yourself for not saying no, those kind of things. That's when you think, ooh, maybe I better take a look at what's really important to me and set some boundaries here.
Then the work begins.
Yeah, get a nice journal, everybody. Get a nice one and pull that out. Some people may think, oh, journaling, I don't, but you know what? Even 5 minutes every morning, and then you look back at it, and you look back at it 6 months, a year, see how far you've come, see what was important, see what you were. I've found it really helpful. You don't have to do it every day, but I do think it's a great tool.
Marla, thank you so much. This has been such an important conversation. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about how people can get in touch with you if they'd like to work with you or take one of your programs?
Oh, yeah. My website, marlamartenson.com. It's MarlaMartenson. And at Instagram, I'm the Mystical Matchmaker. And I've got a podcast. I've got a YouTube channel. You can find everything, at Instagram or on my website. And I do one-on-one coaching, and then I do group programs, and they're really powerful. And I do readings. So, check out my website. You can see if there's anything there that you are interested in.
Amazing. And we'll pop all the links in the show notes as well. Thank you again so much for being here. Do you have a few parting words for our audience today?
Just remember that you matter, you're beautiful, you are a goddess, and just honor yourself, and really just take that deep breath and sit in gratitude every day for how freaking awesome that you are. And you can do this. You need to set boundaries. You can take baby steps, and you can do it. You can become a boundary badass.
This podcast is a Rebel Love production. To find the links mentioned in this episode, go to rebellove.com/let love begin.
Martenson.
Martenson. Oh, Martenson. Martenson.
Martenson.
Okay. Marla Martenson. Okay, cool. I know we don't pronounce R's here. I'm sorry. You say Marla, and we'd
Right.
say Marla.
Like British. Yeah, Marla.
Yeah.
Marla.
Sorry. Sorry about that.